You're very welcome along to our Saturday panel. It is a huge weekend of European rugby. Munster taking on Toulon a little bit later on at Thomond Park. And then tomorrow, full live and exclusive coverage of Leinster against Saracens from the Aviva Stadium in front of a crowd of over 51,000. It is a long, long way from the humble beginnings of, well, European rugby and of Leinster rugby as well, because we're going to talk about where they were, less than 2 decades ago now, with Mike Ruddock, with Reggie Corrigan, and also with Matt Williams, who joins us on the line on Skype from France. Afternoon, Matt.
Afternoon, guys.
Thanks a lot for joining us. We have Mike and Reggie in studio. We decided to do this after having Mike, you were in just before the Grand Slam decider, and yourself and Matt got telling a few tales about when you started out. I think you were at Swansea together first, and when you arrived and when you brought Matt and you inflicted Matt upon Leinster rugby at the turn of the century. You might talk to us all about your arrival at Leinster, summer of '97. What sort of a state was the province in?
Yeah, it's good to reflect back to those days, and of course I just spent 7 years at my old club as coach in Swansea. I'd had a bit of good bit of luck there. Won a couple of championships and the Welsh Cup, those sort of things. So at the end of 7 years, you're starting to look around as a coach and say, well, I got a certain amount of time on the shelf here. Perhaps I need to look for a new challenge. And the IRFU advertised for 4 provincial directors of rugby or coaching, and I applied for the Leinster job and managed to get that. I was very sort of pleased to get that. Came over in the summer of '97, immediately called a fitness testing day. Now bear in mind I was the only employee. We had sort of external consultants came to deliver the testing, and Reggie will probably remember I started chatting to the boys about weight training, and some of them told a good story, but when we put them to the test, there was no real culture of weight training and gym work amongst the Irish boys at that time, so much so that I was probably, well, I actually was the highest scoring person as coach on the bench press that day. So I decided to take it on from there, and Emmett Byrne had told me he was a big lifter, but actually came second. So wherever I went from there, Reg, you might remember I introduced Emmett as the second strongest man in Leinster, just to wind him up. So, and then just very quickly, the next part was I went out on the field to run the session, and the chief executive at the time of the Leinster branch, now bear in mind the Leinster branch was a porter cabin next to Wesley Rugby Club, and we were training on the back pitch at Donnybrook, and the tennis club were in for the summer, and the chief exec said, don't go into the 22, only use 3/4 of the pitch. And I sort of thought to myself, hang on now, this is a professional rugby team, we're going to go into Europe. I'm not going to be constrained by all these directives. I'm going to do my own thing, make a bit of an impact.
So you didn't want you doing a full pitch session?
I did a full pitch session. Some of my Welsh language, if you like, was not too, didn't go down particularly well with the tennis club, so much so the chief exec came out and we had a full-blown row on the 22 about the fact that I'd gone into unmarked territory, really, against his wishes. So the first day, if you like, was me having a blazing row with the chief executive, breaking some of the rules, and obviously the reality of the work that was in front of us all, Reg, in terms of getting a bit fitter and stronger. So that was the starting point, but hey, look at it now, 20 years on, it's absolutely fantastic.
So when you applied for that job, and European rugby was very much in its infancy, I think we're probably just starting the 3rd season of the European Cup, and the French clubs had dominated the opening couple of years. Were you coming in with the mindset of this is a really exciting time to come into Irish rugby, with professionalism starting, that I can really change the ethos, the culture, and bring them to a whole new level? Or was it very much, well, a journey into the unknown? You didn't know what the expectations of hopes around Leinster were?
It was a bit of both. Obviously, as a coach, you try and back yourself, obviously, in any situation. But certainly it was a journey into the unknown. And of course, in those days, the clubs were bigger, dare I say it, in terms of profile historically than the provinces in some ways. And I'll give you an example. Reggie might remember this. We played down in Munster, I think, in about the 97 into pros, and Munster would have, I think Keith Wood actually played. It was Axel played. It was the Claw, Peter Closey, Mick Galway, all these legends. Yeah. Reggie would have played, Trevor Brennan, I remember Victor Costello, Shane Hogan was just starting out, those sort of lads. And we actually won won the game down there, and it was about 100 people watching this game with all these top international players on in it, and it was in the middle of August, which might explain possibly the lack of interest. But I was told a few weeks later that Gary Owen, because we played it in the Gary Owen game field, that Gary Owen played somewhere like Shannon a few weeks later, and there was 8,000 there.
Yeah.
So the
interprovincials were almost pre-season friendlies.
Yes, that's pretty well.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, there was only 3 games for a start. It wasn't home and away at that stage, and then the Guinness came in and sponsored it, and they tried to turn it into more of an event, and then we went with the home and away, and we actually won the first Interpro. Like back in those days, winning the Interpro series actually meant something, because there wasn't a whole lot else. Remember, a pro league wasn't there. There was no Celtic League as it became known, or Pro 14 as it is now, or there was none of that. So you had your Interpros and you had Europe, and the rest of the time you went back to your club. So the club was all important in those days, and held a lot of power, and the club was probably more important in many ways than the provincial game. Certainly, in places like Shannon and Garryowen and Cork Con, the powerhouses of Munster rugby as they were at the time, that was the case, definitely.
So, are we happy with that? Or when Mike is coming in and taking over at Leinster and there is the European Cup, was the province gaining momentum? Was there a sense amongst the players, we want more of this?
Well, no question. Like from my point of view, going back to the very beginning when Mike was talking about when he came in, I mean, that's when I came in as well. I got a lucky break in that Ken Ging was the manager of Leinster at the time, and he managed to twist Mike's arm and allow me to go in for a trial. Now, when he talks about bench press, he was bench pressing twice what I was at the time. I mean, that was the reality of it. We were weights and weight training and all that type of stuff in clubs was pretty much non-existent, except for the odd few who went and found their own gym and were.
So what was it? Train Tuesday, Thursday nights, playing a Saturday?
Correct.
Go out in the lash afterwards.
That was life back then. That's what amateur rugby was. Mike came in, and I'll never forget that first 12 weeks that Mike came in. It was absolute hell on earth. I mean, it finished Neil Francis' career. He gave up. We were being flogged. Literally gave up. We were being flogged by Mike. He came in, this broad Welsh accent. Matt is he comes across this nice, giant, friendly, bubbly type of character, cuddly bear fella now. And, as we become friends, I've got to know him that way. Trust me, in those days he wasn't. He was a tyrant. He was an absolute tyrant. He flogged us from morning till night, 5-6 days a week for 12 weeks. I lost 2.5 stone, completely changed body shape, as did everybody on the team. We trained like we'd never trained before. Boot camp is what we basically called it. And he got us to a level that I don't know if Leinster had ever been as fit in terms of, we were fit players, we were playing good stuff, and like you said, we beat all the other provinces that year. So we liked it and we wanted more of it, and that was the beginning of it. So there was rumours that this league was going to start, this professional league, and we were all over it. We were like praying that it would happen, because it meant we were going to be playing games week in, week out.
You're right, but at the time as well, though, we knew no different. It was what it was. That was the model. It was our job to try and give our best shot in Europe, and do that in a certain time period when we had control of the players, because after that they went back to the clubs. So we, for example, we beat in that first year. I remember we beat Leicester
in Donnybrook.
So if Leinster played Leicester in the European Cup now, it'd probably be in the Aviva. 50,000 people. We were delighted. It was about 8,000.
Well, no, what happened was, if you remember, we played them in Donnybrook. You're talking about Austin Healy, Greenwood, Neil Back, Martin Johnson, Garforth, Roundtree. I
was looking at some of the Leicester's results around that time. They were destroying teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And they came to Dublin for a party, basically. This was the easy trip to Dublin to get it. We played it in Donnybrook. It started off the game with about 1,000 people at the match, and it ended up with about 8,000 there, because basically it was a Friday night in Donnybrook at about 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I can't remember exactly what time, and word spread that Leinster aren't doing too bad here, lads, whatever, and word spread around the Donnybrook area, and people started to filter in, and by the end of the game it literally was, you couldn't move in the place, and I think we won 15-9 or 15-6 or something like that. We were camped on our own line, I remember.
Yeah, Reggie had to go to tight end.
I'd never played tight end in my life. I was in against...
You're the Andrew Porter of your day, were you?
God, about half the size of him. But and I was thrown in a tight head and somehow managed to cling on, and we held on and we got the win. And it was a shock result.
Exactly, but the sort of key point is that we had a couple of weeks to get some sort of level of cohesion, whereas Leicester had several seasons to get that level of cohesion and had a sort of very settled team and squad.
You make it sound the way you're talking, and it's 2 decades on, but that it was almost a straightforward thing to come in and change the culture to instill this new, more professional culture. But like Neil Francis is one player you lose. Did you lose many players over that sort of 12-week initiation where you're really piling the pressure on?
We'd lost quite a number that because the game had just become professional. So it was in 95. This was 97. So there was a number of players like Malcolm O'Kelly, for example, that went over to England. We subsequently got back into the fold. I remember Alan Roland had retired, and I sat down and had a lunch with Alan and asked him would he reconsider and play for one more season to give me time to get some guys through the system. And
Victor Costa was in London Irish as well. He came back.
So it was that sort of thing. There were a lot of guys gone missing. So, but the positive for that, and we see it on a more systematic scale these days, is once you lose a quality player, the depth and quality in Leinster is quite unique. So that gave opportunities to youngsters like Shane Horgan, for example, who was only 18 when he came in the squad. Gordon Darcy, I remember picking him out of Clonger's school. He's a full-back.
Kevin Nolan as well. Remember, full-back.
Well, Kevin Nolan
capped that year.
Yeah, was capped for Ireland when his sort of background initially was fairly average, I guess, without being unkind, and he improved out of this.
John McWeeny was another one who was playing for Mary's, and all of a sudden this season when Mike came in, and I firmly believe it was down to the level of fitness that we'd gotten in that boot camp, that 12-week period. There were skills there they needed to be worked on, but we probably couldn't compete for long enough periods of time with teams in the past because of fitness levels. But because everybody was so fit, suddenly we had stars like Dennis and with amazing backline to boot, and all of a sudden these lads were doing this stuff on the pitch because they were fit enough to be able to do it.
Yeah, but I guess that was the easiest part for me. What we needed to do then was to go forward in a more professional way and have better coaching and a coaching team. But of course we didn't have the budget. There was no Celtic League, and I kept asking the Leinster branch, could you give me a quality backs coach to work with the backs? They deserved better than just me on my own, and because if you think about it, I was a scrum coach, line-out coach, breakdown coach, defence coach, attack,
all in one.
All in one.
Fitness and strength and conditioning as well.
So eventually Matt was in town and we got chatting, and Leicester supported the chance to bring Matt in, and of course he took this backline to another level and eventually took the team to another level, which is fantastic.
Matt, so yourself and Mike knew each other from Swansea from back in the day. Where were you in your life, 97, 98, and were Leinster, when did they start to come onto your radar?
Mate, they didn't. I was coaching the Waratahs in the first years of Super Rugby, so it was 96 to 99, and we had just finished at the Waratahs, and I went to watch the World Cup in 1999, just on a jolly with some guys I went to school with, and I heard Mike Ruddock was in town, and literally contacted Mike as an old mate from Swansea. Dickie Moriarty had played at my club in Sydney, and I went across to Swansea for a year in 84, 85 and met Mike there. And I literally just wanted to catch up and have a pint, say, g'day, isn't that amazing? Have a chat. And we did. And the next day, Mikey said, well, listen, stay for 6 weeks and coach the backs. And 18 years later, I'm still sort of knocking about. So it's all Ruddock's fault. But Mikey sort of, as is his wont, downplays his input into the whole initial setup. And when I came in, Mike was sort of, I think every day was like a practical joke. Every day I'd walk in and I said, Mikey, where's the video room? And he said, just go down and ask them down there. So I went down to the Leinster branch, which was a porter cabin, and I asked them, I said, where's the video room? They sort of looked at me like I had two heads and said, I'll try that room down there on the left. So I walked down and I opened the door. There's an empty room with an old cupboard like you had as a 12-year-old kid, you know. I opened the cupboard up and there's a video still in the box in the bottom of this cupboard. Like, there was nothing. Wow. There was absolutely nothing. So I'd come from Super Rugby and Mikey had come from Swansea, where we'd made these big strides, and where Irish professional rugby was so far behind the rest of the world. It was just amazing. And there were days where Mike would just watch my reaction. We used to go to training at St Andrew's schools. Didn't have a home ground, and I would be saying, "Where's the change rooms?" And Mikey would sort of have a half smug smile on his face, and "Where's the equipment room?" And the equipment room was the back of Mike's car. We didn't have an office. We didn't have a change room. We were training at various venues. Like, it was like the under-12s. It was off the planet.
You might remember, Matt, that Ken Ging finally got us a TV company or a retail outlet to sponsor a video for us. And we put it up in one of the local pubs, Matt, you might remember.
Oh, yeah, Madigan's, was it? Madigan's, yeah.
And we used to go up and
do our video review of Madigan's at lunchtime.
Which would last like half an hour because we had to rewind it. So Matt is right.
As a player, you might get lucky the odd time where it had got on so long you couldn't skip back.
Well, that's for sure. It certainly wasn't broken down on a player-by-player basis. Yeah. But even things like the weights room, Dave Fagan was looking after the strength and conditioning for us, and he'd come in on a part-time basis and help us. But the weights room was the old galvanised shed that was in Belvedere. And I kid you not, I mean, it was made up of the gear wheels out of trucks and bits and pieces that were welded onto arm bars and everything else. There was no science to it. You hadn't a clue what weight you were lifting, and you just knew they were heavy. And chains and things like this. It was like you know, when Rocky went back in the day and he had to go training up in Russia, in Siberia or something.
I guess we were all feeling our way through it, you know. And
it sounds for you as though this was an absolutely mammoth job. That, as you say, there was a lack of a backs coach, scrum coach, forwards coach, you name it. You were doing all that, but also you were trying to get things in place behind the scenes. You were that director of rugby as well.
And I got to give a lot of credit to Matt there, because he'd come from Super Rugby and he was so much more advanced. He was so much further down the track than me in terms of professional structures, and I learned a lot from Matt in that regard, and how to probably argue the case a little bit better than I did. I tended to perhaps not go into the detail that Matt did when I met with the Provincial Management Committee at times. So it was, you know, but Matt's experience of that was fantastic, and he was fantastic for the team going forward. When I eventually then left to go to Wales, the Welsh Rugby Union asked me to coach the Wales A team and take on a contract for that, and coach a club there. Then obviously Matt then took it on to another level, which is fantastic, you know.
Reggie, was there still some leftovers from the amateur era in those initial
100%? I mean, you know, we got through the first sort of year season and it was quite successful and we were happy with it. We won the Inter-Pros. We'd gotten a win against Leicester. Funnily enough, you know, we beat Leicester in Donnybrook, and then the following week went and lost to Milan, in Milan, you know. And
yeah, but that was your fault, Reg. You were tight there, if you remember.
Yeah, exactly.
What were the trips abroad like in those days?
They were, well, I tell you, there was no chartered planes.
I'm interested about this one.
There was no chartered planes, but I give you, like, we did lose that game in the last minute, and this was the problem, was the inconsistencies of the way we played. But I'll never forget the following, like, it didn't stop us going out, I can tell you that, after losing in Milan, and we did that. But the following morning, Mike was like a bear. You all see the nice cuddly side, but I'm telling you, he was like a bear. And at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock the following morning, he had us all out of bed. He was going around banging on doors. Didn't know what was going on. I was in the room with Victor Costello. I was like, what's that? I don't know, there must be a fire or something. No idea. And get up, get out of your beds, get up. And marched us all down to the lobby in our tracksuits. And next thing is, we're out the door of the hotel, jogging in double file down the streets
in the cornfield we went
in Milan. But like the locals were looking at us about 8 o'clock in the morning. These Italian people who had never seen a rugby team before, bear in mind, were looking at us going, what is the story with this crowd? You know, who are they? And down the road, and Mike says, take a right here, take a left here, up here, down here. Next thing is we're jumping over a wall and we're in the middle of a cornfield in Milan, running around, dying, by the way, wondering what's happening here. And he starts screaming, get to the front, Victor. Victor was at the back of the two fight. He says, get to the front, Victor, get to the front. Victor was trying to push the engine, but it wouldn't work. And he says, get to the front, Victor, I'll find you £200. So Victor says, tell me who to make the check out. That was it. He was done. he couldn't get up to the front. But they were the days. That's what it was like. And
Victor couldn't. He'd had a few beers, I think, so he wasn't really changing pace. And I said, Victor, if you could...
He kind of had only one gear on the long runs anyway.
£200. He said, who do I make the check out to? And the boys had such sympathy for him, they all slowed down. And it appeared as though he got the front.
We got there. But I mean, travelling was different. There was no such thing as chartered planes. We had to wait on domestic flights like everybody else. And it was an experience, but we knew no different. That's the whole point, Nathan. Nobody knew any different, whether it be the training, the regime, the travel, the matches, all of that was just what it was.
We see the way that the evolution has gone in Leinster rugby now, and in Irish rugby. The Leinster Academy is providing so many players throughout the country. Back then, players were still coming from the clubs, and like we've seen since the Grand Slam that there's this huge pride, understandably, from Michaels and from the various private schools that supply the players. Was that pride there within the club system initially when you were playing for Leinster? Was there great pride within your club that you were being chosen for the interprovincials, or the fact that they were no longer really the main focal point? Was there a bit of jealousy that now everyone's thinking about?
It was huge for the clubs, because at the time in the programmes, if you were playing international, your name was there and your club was beside it. And in Greystones, for example, which is the club I was with when I started out, I subsequently moved to Lansdowne and then went back to Greystones. But when I was in Greystones, they had a wall and there was a portrait of every player who played for Ireland, and they got a hand-sketched portrait up on the wall. It's still there to this day, and that's the kind of stuff that meant so much to the club, and it was almost like bragging rights. And clubs like Lansdowne and Garryowen and Young Munster and Cork Con and Dungannon and big clubs at the time, the pride they had in having internationals as part of their setup, as part of their organisation, was all important at the time. The club was a big deal in those days. It's lost its value in terms of the feeder to international rugby or even provincial rugby now, unfortunately. But in those days, it was very real.
Matt, so when you arrived over from the Waratahs and the way you're talking about it, the level of professionalism was far ahead of what you saw in Ireland. And I guess looking back, you can go, it was a great challenge. But were there a lot of frustrations in those opening few years where you couldn't get the things you wanted to maybe fast track the level of professionalism?
Yeah, I think the main thing was after the first session I had with Mike, I walked off and I went up to Mike and I said, geez, there's some talent here. There's some real talent on this team. And because the conditions were so poor, I was expecting the talent to be poor as well, and it wasn't. It was really good. And Mikey said to me, I've been trying to tell everyone this and no one will listen to me. I'll never forget his words. And that's what sort of gave us as coaches real motivation that inside this team there was a championship group in there. I'll give you an example how why is Leinster rugby and Irish rugby doing well? Because the committees and the leadership is good. Why were we poor? Because the committees and leadership, the poor guys, they didn't know what professionalism was. I'll give you an example. I was asking for all these things that Mike said. We didn't even have enough footies to go to training. We didn't even have enough rugby balls. We had 4 or 5 balls for a professional side, and they were like a year old. They're slippery, but they got me a blazer in a week. In a week, I had a Leinster blazer.
You looked the part, if nothing else.
I said, I don't want a blazer. Just buy me some footballs, But that's what it was like. It was frustrating, And I give Mike huge credit. There was a game, and one of the officials, and I won't say it was, he was drunk and he came into the change room at half time. And I blew up. I was only assistant coach, but automatically I started to get angry, and Mikey was sensational. Mikey managed the scenario, moved him along. But that affected the players. Now, I got lucky. Foot and mouth disease hit, and I think that was in 2000. And what happened was all rugby, we couldn't travel, all rugby was off for about 3 months at the end of the year. The Six Nations was actually called off. But it gave us 6 months with the team, the 3 or 4 months at the end of the year, then the pre-season. So when Mikey's saying there he had 10 weeks, I got 6 months. And we got some more staff on full-time. Jason was on, Jason Cowman, who's so successful with the Irish team now. Davey Fagan was there, these boys. And we were able to take that fitness level up significantly. We got all our skills worked on significantly, and we could put some attacking and some defensive systems in place.
Yeah,
and really, it was that six months.
And I think you managed to get a video analyst in as well, Matt, didn't you?
I did, Mikey, and as another quick story on that, where Mikey couldn't get any money, and right at the end, Mike recommended me for the job. Mikey went, as he said, went to Ireland A. He rang me up. I was back in Australia. Said, "Listen, mate, I'm going back to Wales. I'll put you in for the job." And within a couple of days, I got a phone call. So, I owe Mike Ruddock massively for the rest of my rugby career. Without him, I wouldn't have got those opportunities. But I also got told something that Mikey didn't. They were that disorganised. One of the committee men said to me quietly on the side, "We don't actually have a budget, Matt." I said, "Well, what do you mean? I need a budget." He said, "No, we don't have a budget." I said, "Well, I've got to have a budget." He said, No, listen to me. Spend what you want for the next 6 months. You'll get hauled over the coals, but you'll get everything. So we just bought everything we could possibly think of under the sun because there was no budget. The committee signed off on it and paid it and bought it, knowing full well what I was doing. At the beginning of the year, they called me in and said, "Matt, you've overspent a lot of money last year. That's disgraceful. Next point on the committee meeting, please." So they basically used the system. They realised they were behind and used the system that didn't have a budget, so we got it in. So within 6 months of Mikey going, I had money, I had staff, I had equipment.
Where was the money coming from?
The money just... See, you were linked to the IRFU, but because the system was so bad, they didn't have a professional team budget for the Leinster team. So we just bought everything we could.
When did the Celtic... When did the Celtic League start, man?
2001.
Yeah, so it was around about that time as well. So I think they realised as well, Matt, around that time that because you go into a league, you're going to get some income coming in with gates and TV money. So they probably realised they could cover a bit of this expenditure as well. But great story, mate.
But it wasn't just about that though, Matt. I mean, from a player's point of view, yes, there was more equipment happening, there was more staff coming online, there was all these different things, but it was the way Matt had a charming way of persuading. I was captain at the time, so he had a charming way of persuading you to do things that you were completely against at the beginning, and you walked out going, how did that actually happen? How did I agree to that? And then I had to go and sell it to the players. But basically things like the way it was at the time was rugby was treated a bit like a job, because it had just turned professional. It was treated like a job. So it was Monday to Friday was training, and then we'd have a game on a Friday night, and then you had Saturday and Sunday off, and you'd go out in the beer on a Friday night after the match, and then Saturday and Sunday go back in on Monday. But slowly but surely Matt started to change that attitude, and he brought in these things called recovery sessions. We're looking at him going, what's a recovery session? So you're in a pool on the Saturday morning to recover after the game the night before. He brought in ice baths, he brought in massage. It was compulsory massage. If you didn't do it, players were questioned about it. Then the game started to move that they wouldn't just be on Friday nights, they might be on Saturdays and Sundays as well. So the whole week changed. So the players had to change accordingly, so that we had to train on different ways, and suddenly your weekends became non-existent. And that added that kind of, like you said it there earlier, you said Tuesday, Thursday training with a match on a Saturday. Well, Saturday was your night out. It was where you went out and you met your friends, you had the crack. Sunday you recovered, and Monday you went back to work in your normal job.
Well, originally we had we used to go after matches into Kylie's in Donnybrook, and they would have cocktails named after all the boys.
There was a dive in Darcy, I remember that well. Trevor Brennan's was, I can't remember what his was, but you want to be brave you had to be brave to take it. But the dive in Darcy was a popular one.
The social aspect was still in the early days,
there was a whole list.
You remember that, Matt? Yeah.
I do. But you had one named after you too, Mikey. You had
Well, it must have been a double, a big one.
But like our lunch, every day we had lunch in Kylie's. You know, we'd train in Donnybrook, we'd train in Belvedere.
And that'd be whatever you wanted, chips, the whole...
Well, eat as much as you could. Get up to Kylie's and get the full roast, and Pat and the lads and Johnny would be looking after us up there, and full roast dinner, and then go back out and train again in the afternoon. But like the science of it was non-existent, but the effort was second to none. I mean, and what I getting back to that point I was making, that Matt changed the attitude, but you have to really admire the attitude of the players. Like I went to them and said, look, he wants to bring in swimming on a Saturday morning and yoga and baths, ice baths, and lads are looking at me going, what, really? I thought, listen, we better try this out, like, you know. And in fairness, they tried it and they went with it, and the attitude slowly changed. And then, you know, like another reason Matt was able to get that money was quite simple. We won 15 games in a row to win that first Celtic League title. We were unbeaten. We were filling the grounds, and we were nearly 40,000 people at that first final against Munster in Lansdowne Road. So the branch were no fools. They were looking at this going, hang on a second here, lads, we're making serious bread off this. So they didn't go against the fact that, you know, Matt wanted to buy equipment and everything else, because they were afraid that if they interfered and did something as stupid as that, they'd stop us winning the games that we were winning. Yeah. So we were successful, and when you're successful, it's kind of easier to twist the budget's arm a little bit.
By the sound of it,
there's one other nice story there that I got off Mikey. I knew the boys were sneaking out having a few pints here and there, so I went around to most of the pubs that I knew they haunted, and I gave the doorman or the barman.
You must have been busy that day.
And I said to him, if you ring me or text me, if any of the Leinster boys come in, I'll give you another 50. And I'm sitting at home. I was down at Greystones where Mikey showed me lived at Greystones as well, where Reggie lives. And I get a text one night. I'll use my old mate Victor Costello's name just to protect the innocent. And he said, Matt, Victor Costello and Trevor Brennan are in Longs. So I text Victor. I said, Victor, get out of the pub, be at my office at 9 a.m. Victor looks around. He's trying to find me. He said, where the hell is he? How does he know I'm here? So they walk out of Longs. They drive up the road to one of the other ones, Sash's as it was in the old days up there. Guy at Sash's texted me, said, Victor and Trevor are in Sash's. Victor, get out of Sash's, be in my office at 8 a.m. And I didn't tell him for about another 10 years, but I knew I had him beaten then. Won after that.
Like, remember,
it's the best €200 I ever
these were
spent.
the days when you could hide. There was no social media, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no any of that stuff. You could actually hide. It was a great time.
Yeah. It is our Saturday panel. It's with thanks to Air, home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content for free with Air Broadband. We have Reggie Corrigan and Mike Ruddock in studio. Matt Williams is joining us on the line from France as well. We're reminiscing about the good old days, very much so, of Leinster rugby back around the turn of the century. Reggie, by the sounds of what you're saying then, in that sort of maybe even just a 3-year period from when Mike arrived at Leinster to when Matt was taking over as head coach, it was a very different dressing room, maybe a far more open dressing room, a dressing room open to ideas, willing to change? Completely,
and starting to become very player driven. So whilst, you know, we're having fun here and we're talking about the nights out and the good old days and the crack that we had, and we had plenty of it, the work ethic was second to none as well. And, you know, you had players like Drinko was starting out in his career. You had Dennis Hickey, you had Shane Horgan, you had Malcolm O'Kelly coming back. Keith Gleeson was a huge addition to the squad. He came in, Matt introduced him. He was a huge addition to the squad in terms of changing the attitude and the professional way of doing it. You know, when I say to you we brought in recovery sessions, they became the norm. Yoga became the norm. Massage became the norm. So all of a sudden things that were alien to us 6 months prior became the norm. Even things like food and nutrition and all those types of things. And players were keen to get more and more success. So it didn't just become a case of us wanting to win Celtic leagues. Now we were looking at Europe, and we were looking at Europe in a realistic way. Like, I'll never forget when we lost to Perpignan in that semi-final. I was heartbroken for 2 months afterwards, because we were such a good team at the time. We should have won the European Cup that time. You know, in my opinion, I'll always stand by that. I think we were a good enough team to win Europe that time, and we took our eye off the ball against Perpignan, and it hurt all the players. So the dressing room was completely open to change. It was open to any sort of new ideas, as daft as they may have sounded, and open to trying to improve themselves all the time. And I think you saw that then manifest itself even more, certainly in 2003, 2004 season, when Eddie he got a hold of us for Ireland, he was getting players who were coming from provinces that had been more professional, and we went and won the Triple Crown for the first time in 19 years, and I think that was a direct result of a change of attitude right across the provinces.
Yeah, Mike, for you then, as time went on and you're a couple of years into the job, maybe you're starting to put the building blocks in place, it must have been particularly exciting when you're starting to see Shane Horgan coming through and Gordon Darcy, and being able to give him a start, and starting to see players like Brian O'Driscoll emerge as well.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted that I can sort of say that I gave people like Brian O'Driscoll his first contract, Gordon Darcy. Now, you'd have to be a bit of, behind the eight ball not to see that these boys had talent. So, I can't pat myself on the back too much, but it was nice to sort of see them at the beginning and see these guys starting out. In the same way that I'm quite pleased that I was involved with Ireland in the 20s with Gary Ringrose and Jack Conan and these sort of Dan Levy, these sort of guys. You get to know them and you're pleased for their success, But as Reggie said, they all were really tremendous players, great attitude, great ability, and they were going to do very, very well anyway. But I think the other key things apart and over and above from what the lads have talked about, which are absolutely spot on 100%, is once the Celtic League became a league, the model changed. So whereas, as I said, I had them for 12, 14 weeks, they go back to the clubs, and in a lot of ways the clubs were bigger at that time because rugby wasn't on television. You had the European highlights would be on a Sunday night, for example. Suddenly the league games were on live on TV. You had the season of league rugby. You had the clubs having to take a bit more of a back seat, and their best players were now in the provincial team, and the top coaches like Matt with a proper professional coaching staff. So suddenly the whole model changed quite dramatically, and a budget started to come in because you would get gate money and you'd have to find money to travel, and so the whole thing changed, I think, around about that 2001 season with the introduction of the Celtic League, and it allowed Matt to kick on with his plans, really.
What sort of contracts were you on at the start?
Mine first contract was a part-time contract for $7,500. So it was huge money.
What do you mean by part-time?
Well, it was termed a part-time contract, so I was allowed work alongside it. So I could work during the day and come in and train. I'd go training in the morning before work and then train in the evening. The sessions were arranged to be from 6 o'clock onwards.
I would run weight sessions in UCD at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning for the boys before they go to work. I'd call sessions there, and then we'd have a Monday night at St Andrews, Tuesday night at St Andrews, Thursday night at St Andrews.
So 6 o'clock would be there, and we trained there after work. And that's the way it was. But I fairly quickly realised it wasn't going to... You just couldn't do it. I mean, the level of training that you were trying to be...
And where are you working?
I was working, I was a sales rep for an air freight company over in Feltram on the north side. But I actually took a bit of a leap of faith, and I packed in the job and took on the rugby full-time, but luckily enough within 6 months I got a full-time contract.
And in fairness to Reg, I mean, I'd very often go in the gym there, and you'd be in training, wouldn't you, on your own. So you
I needed to, because I was only half the bench press you were, so you were showing me up so much I was embarrassed. But
did you love that side of it?
I love I love the fact that in 12 weeks from putting in the work, I'd never ever experienced it before. I could get fit, and like I said, lost 2.5 stone, changed body shape, but also to be able to play rugby because you were fit, to be able to play the way you'd love to be able to play was an incredible thing. But in terms of the money, it wasn't for the money in those days, because certainly, I mean, the contracts were 30 grand was a national contract, and then if you got to the top level of a national contract, it was 50, and that was it. It was capped out at 50, but not many people got those. The biggest, probably for most lads, I remember it well, the biggest incentive of all was you got a free car. You got a Ford Mondeo. They were Irish, you were sponsored by Ford at the time, so if you managed to get a national contract of 30 grand, you also got a Ford Mondeo, and you were able to swank around in that. So it certainly wasn't for the love of money. It still had that feel of amateurism to it.
Matt, when you were starting out then with Leinster and O'Driscoll, Darcy, Horgan are emerging, did you sense that they were bringing with them higher expectations, both as players, and that they, as Reggie mentioned, that more player-driven focus was starting to emerge at the province?
Yeah, I think people forget that players, just like people, develop and grow and mature and learn. And, they were pretty wild young blokes at the beginning. Their talent was undeniable. For me, the big turning point was Brian scored those 3 tries in Paris. He then got picked on the 2001 Lions tour. and he came back a different player because he'd been around. It was Martin Johnson was captain of that tour, Neil Back, all those great, Martin Corrie, all those great English and Welsh players were on that tour. And I remember Brian coming back and saying to me one day, look, I understand what you're saying about we're not working at the right level. And he was the best, he and Campuzzi, the two best trainers I've ever coached. But Brian wasn't a great trainer at the beginning. He had this talent. But he just learnt, if we're going to win, that's what you've got to do. And he became very demanding. I think that rubbed off on Shane Horgan, Denny Hickey in his own way. And you look at that group, so that was 2001. On the 2005 tour to New Zealand, I think there was 7 Leinster players. Was that right? 7 or 6. Shane Byrne, Malcolm, Dennis, Das. Not Das on that one. Dricky, Shag, Shane Horgan. They'd gone from drinking cans of Heineken in the shower at Donnybrook after a game to 5 years later they're British and Irish Lions. So, like Mikey said, no coach can claim that, I did all that, or, that's the boys and everyone in the organisation realising, 1, we got talent, 2, we got to change, and 3, guess what, we can do something here. We can really change. So again, you see where the club is today and this magnificent organisation that they are with this production line of players, selling out the Aviva. All those good young players, except for one that won a Grand Slam, they're Leinster produced players. All that came from that group of players that Reggie was captain of. They laid that foundation. The academy was started then. I had very little to do with it, but we did start an academy there. Bretty Igo and Willie Anderson deserve all the credit for setting up that academy. Now that academy has grown and moved on, but without Dricky and that group of players that Reg was part of, that drive would never have been established. And there's one other aspect to that. The rivalry with Munster drove the organisation. And because Munster were getting all this great publicity and said how fantastic they were, that really bugged us because we were trying our guts out and we weren't getting any of that. And that rivalry that finally came out into that final where the boys won with a player down, that drove everyone for the next 6-7 years. It's probably still driving the clubs today. But Brian coming back from the Lions tour for me was the catalyst in all that.
Did you notice that, Reggie, when he returned in 2001? That there was a different attitude around the place? Yeah,
the where you'd notice it would be in training. The tolerance of mistakes became very small. There wasn't if guys were dropping balls in the past, they'd be like, oh yeah, no worries, sure, look, get it right again, do it again. That wasn't the case anymore. It was get it right. Yeah. That's not good enough that you're dropping the ball. Why isn't that line-up working? What's going on with that scrum? Like, backs coming in asking me at loose head prop, what's going on with that scrum? Why aren't we getting the angle that we want? We need that angle. Because of the backline we had, they demanded the ball, and we were very much just the instruments for them to do what they did. I mean,
were you okay with that type of questioning?
We weren't in the beginning. We weren't in the beginning because, hold on a second, backs, who do you think you are coming in here telling the forwards what to do? If we want to maul it up the pitch, that's what we'll do, get stuffed. But that attitude changed very quickly when you realise, well, hang on a second, it's actually a lot less work for us to do if we give them the ball because they can actually make 20 yards at a time, whereas we're making 5 and killing ourselves for it. So that whole attitude changed, and it was on the back of the style of game that we wanted to play and that we were playing, and that was different. It was a different style. It was a different way of playing rugby in Ireland at the time, and that's what kind of caught people's attention and why Leinster became attractive to a lot of people to go and watch in the style of rugby that we were playing. And it didn't mean that we could always win games because of it. Certainly at times we struggled with Munster's way of playing. They were more the power game and using the forwards and sticking to what worked well for them. and we struggled against that a lot. And you know, the forwards in Leinster were blamed for not being up to it and all this kind of stuff, and the Lady Boys title and all that kind of rubbish that went along with it. But it was just us, you know, the type of game we played was high risk, and if it did go wrong, it was easy for teams to capitalise on it, you know.
We've got to wrap up, unfortunately. We're short on time. Mike, I imagine you hear from Reece what the current setup is like in Leinster. Can you get your head around how it's all changed?
Well, I did pop in there the other week for a meeting anyway, and you see the...
You coming back?
As water boy, yeah. They said I was a bit too slow to get the water on the field, so I didn't get the job. And I tried for a nutritionist, and they didn't even answer my CV, you know. But I popped in and
What'll be wrong with that, Matt?
I got a wide angle.
Matt, pick yourself up off the floor there. But you know, you look at this new indoor training facility with all the gymnasium equipment and the running track and the UCD, the 4G pitches, and let's go back to that first night where we could only use 75% of the field. You know, I think that probably sums it up in 20 years. And well done to everyone who's been involved. I think, and Reggie and the boys here, Matt, and everyone who's helped to drive it forward. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd like to see a committee member now, Matt, walk in between Stuart Lancaster and Leo Cullen and start giving the halftime team talk.
Yeah, with 8 points on board, but Mikey's right. You know, you see the club now. I went and watched them play in Montpellier, and it was dead rubber. They'd already made the quarters, and they just played magnificent rugby. They ran the ball, and what I love, some people say clubs have a DNA, that's arguable, but I can tell you that Leo and Gervin Dempsey have the club playing a style of rugby that everyone from Mikey right through can be proud of, and it's the way Mikey wants to play, it's the way I want the club to play, and they're playing the way that Leinster plays well, with magnificent facilities up at UCD, money in the bank, great crowds. I get great joy out of seeing them being successful right now, and so should everyone.
Yeah, I'd always remember forevermore a comment that Matt said to me once upon a time. As I said, I was captain and Matt was himself, were very close, and he said to me, Reg, I've got an idea someday. This would have been back around 2001. He said, I've got an idea someday that I'm going to see people walking around in Leinster jerseys. And I was looking at him going, are you off your rocker? I mean, we can't get more than 400 people to go to a game. There was no such thing as buying a replica jersey in those days. We were lucky to have a set of jerseys ourselves. Never mind the supporters have them.
You wouldn't be handing them out after the matches.
No, that's for sure. Johnny would have you by the neck if you did that. But he said that to me. He says, I have a vision where we're going to see people walking the streets of Dublin in Leinster jerseys. And I said, you've lost it. You've definitely lost it. And here we are today, where Leinster are probably... not probably, they are one of the powerhouses of European and world rugby, recognised and the name known the world over for quality and for success. And he had the vision 20 years ago that might be the case, and what has been done since, and the people that are in charge of it and running it right the way through to create the machine that it is. Everybody just deserves huge credit.
Yeah, it has been quite a journey over the last 20 years, and tomorrow there'll be 51,000 at the Aviva Stadium. We will be there, full live and exclusive commentary of Leinster against Saracens in the European Champions Cup quarter-final. Matt Williams, thanks a lot for taking the call. I'm sure we'll see you back in these shores shortly.
Pleasure, guys. Great to talk to you. Great to see Mikey and Reggie there, boys.
Cheers, Mike.
And Mike and Reggie, thank you for joining us as well. That is our Saturday panel. Up next, we're going to be looking at all the day's football.